Killer stretching tactics. Hey, I'm Sarah from mostmotion, and I'm here with another How to Hack Injuries episode for every sports and fitness coach who wants to be able to help prevent injuries with their clients, but doesn't want to go down the rabbit hole of having to specialize in injury. So, this question came about from Jan Lloyd, who is a member in the Injury Hackers Facebook group. You can find us at injuryhackers.com. And she wants to know about static stretching, whether it's good to do before or after exercise or both. So before we get into the ins and outs of stretching, because this topic has been debated for decades, okay? There's never been any consensus of whether it's helpful or not in preventing injuries, mainly because it's not possible to predict the future. So there's one thing we need to know before we get into the ins and outs of all the types of stretching and stuff like that, and that is that there is a natural twist to muscle fibers. Okay, it's a natural spiral that follows the same type of spiral as DNA fibers. It's been known for decades in the anatomy industry, and if you didn't know that, go and check your anatomy textbooks. You will find it there. And it's important to know this because bodies strengthen in the way that we use them. You will have heard that before, but also bodies tighten in the way that we use them. So that means that if we're doing anything repetitively, yes, we will get stronger in doing that for a little while, but it will tighten in that way as well. I'm going to use a little towel here to help me demonstrate, okay? So if there's a natural spiral in the fibers, okay, when they're loose, when they're lengthened, they are capable of contracting and stretching as well. But when we move in the same ways over and over again, they get tighter. That means they're less able to contract, which makes us weaker. And it also means they're less able to lengthen as well. So this gives us the need for stretching. But if you try and stretch, just imagining pulling the towel in opposite end direction, then it's not likely that you're going to unwind the spiral in the tissue. So it might feel better at the time, but actually we're not doing anything to combat the problem. So it doesn't matter if you do static stretching, doesn't matter if you do PNF stretching, doesn't matter if you do dynamic stretching. It doesn't matter what type of stretching that you do. If you're only ever working in a lengthening, like in one direction, then it's not going to unwind the spiral. So what we need to do is add movement, okay? So we're keeping one end still. We're not going to move that around. And then we're going to just move this in any direction we can. Why? Because it gives the brain the opportunity to understand where it needs to go in order to unwind the tightness. Bodies like being relaxed and loose. They do not like being tight. So your brain will understand, because it's very clever, how to release this so it becomes much looser and all the rest of it. But this is where coaches normally stop. They think of stretching and that's it. But if we leave our clients' bodies in a newly loosened state, particularly before exercise, then we're actually increasing the risk of injury. Why? Because we have created a new range of motion that the brain has no experience of using. Now, brains learn from experience. So if you leave your client in a state of new range of motion, it might feel better. But if you immediately then go into exercise or life in general, actually, your brain is working on a past experience, which that range of movement wasn't there. So it is likely that your body or clients' bodies will tighten back up again because the brain never had the experience of using this new range of motion, okay? So this is part one. This is the first M of a method I developed called the 3M flow. It's something we go into in the Smart Coach certification. And I learned this through years and years of experience of working with people in a coaching setting, how they learn, how they remember things, and how they develop with practice. Okay, but also on the treatment table. So when I'm trying to establish a new movement pattern, then this is kind of where it came from. Okay, so corrective exercise, all that kind of stuff. It's developed over a lot of years, and it's a mishmash of all the things that I have learned and how we function as human beings. So the first step in the 3M flow method is to create this new range of motion through movement. Okay, once we have that, then we need to go to the next M, which is MIDI, and that is allowing the brain the experience of using this new range of motion in the context of the full joint range of motion. Okay, so if you take a particular stretch, for example, let's say you're using a pec stretch. Okay, you might start with a traditional pec stretch position, but you're just going to add movement to allow your brain to increase that range of motion, get rid of that spiral. When we want the brain to use this new range of motion, then it may well be that you take your hand off the wall and you just clap your hands in front and then open your hands like this. Okay, that's going to give your brain a new experience of taking your hands behind you with this new range of motion that you created, but also from a very closed position. Okay, so when your hands are in front of you, it's closed. When your hands are behind you, it's open. So now your brain has a new range of motion. It has a new experience of using that range of motion, but it still has no experience of coordinating that range of motion with the rest of the body. And that's where the next stage, or the final stage of the 3M flow comes in, which is maxi. Okay, and that means that we're adding this new range of motion, okay, with a complex movement. Now, it could be blinking. It could be as simple as blinking. It could be nodding your head. It could be squatting. It could be anything that your body, your brain is having to coordinate with the new range of motion. And we can do that. When we do that, we're embedding this new range of motion into a normal setting for your brain, which is much more likely to create a permanent change for your movement patterns. Okay, so that means that every time we come to do the 3M flow, we are starting from a better point than we were last time we started. Okay, so over time we're creating an improvement, whereas if we just stop at creating the new range of motion, our bodies tighten back up again, and then we go through this horrible yo-yoing of feeling loose and feeling tight and feeling loose and feeling tight. Okay, so it's not just more effective than stretching in terms of how your brain functions, it's also using movement which creates individuality in your clients, which means more people in your groups can feel what's going on in their bodies. And when we have our clients connected to our bodies, that means that they can tell us about issues that they're having earlier on, because they can identify where these small tightnesses are. Okay, they can adjust their own bodies into where it feels best for them. Okay, you're not saying to them, you should feel it here. You're allowing them to move around in a way that feels most comfortable to them, because everybody's body in your session is an individual body. It's unique to them. Okay, it has a history of life experience that is unique to that person. So how we can say to people we should be feeling it in a certain place, I don't know. So when we use movement, we're allowed to do that. We're including more people, and also it's using more muscles at once. Okay, it's much, much faster using movement than it is to try and hold a static stretch, for example, for 30 seconds. So while everybody else is doing that and doing something for 30 seconds, we can spend that 30 seconds going through the entire flow, so we can create the new range of motion, we can give the brain the new experience of using it, and we can coordinate it into the brain so that we are embedding it as a new range of motion within that same 30 seconds. So do we do this before or after exercise? To answer your question, Jan, both. But if we try to create too much of a new range of motion before exercise, that means that we are putting the tissue, we're putting the muscles and the bones into a position where they don't have the resilience to cope with the training. Because let's face it, most bodies have been stuck for a long time. You might have clients in their 30s, 40s, 50s whose, let's say, their ankle hasn't moved for decades. Okay, they twisted it in their, I don't know, teenage years. Maybe they sprained it, broke their ankle, whatever. It hasn't moved for a long time. If you all of a sudden get somebody's body moving and then ask them to, let's say, I don't know, go for a run, then the muscles and the tissue inside of that joint doesn't have the resilience. It doesn't have the practice at being in that new range of motion. So if we spend too long increasing that range of motion before exercise, then that can be just as dangerous as it can be increasing the risk of injury is what I'm trying to say. Okay. The best time to spend more time dealing with the increasing the range of motion is after exercise. Okay. But it's very important that we go through the whole 3M flow, because your brain needs those stages to embed this into a permanent change. Okay, so Jan, I hope that answered your question. Let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions yourself and you want them answered like this on, in a more detailed setting, then make sure you come and join us at injuryhackers.com. You'll be able to watch this show live, ask questions, things like that, and I will answer them on each episode. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.